Good morning, students. This is Miss Brown speaking, here with another exciting video in the Miss Brown Presents lines. So today's topic is adaptations. Well, Miss Brown, what's an adaptation? I'm about to tell you. But before we start with the reading, and we're not going to read it in depth, I'm just going to use some of the pictures to explain some things. Before we start, there's a few words that I want you guys to be able to understand. These are science terms. So the first one here, if we look over here, and you should be writing these in your notebook, and not only that, you should have adaptations written at the top of your notebook as well. I'm going to explain them, and then you can pause the video to write them down. So the first word is organism. That's just a very fancy way to say a living thing. So a plant or an animal. You're an organism, I'm an organism. Cats, dogs, birds, trees, flowers. We're all organisms. It's just a fancy way of saying a living thing. A species is a group of animals or plants, so a group of organisms, a group of living things that are related and similar. All right, so a species, like there are dog species, cat species, different species of birds. So, hummingbird is different from other birds, so it's its own unique species. All right, this one we're just going to mention some in the reading, but organism is definitely one I want you to understand. All right, focus on organism. And I also definitely want you to focus on habitat. Habitat is just a fancy way of saying the animal's environment. And environment's a fancy way of saying where it lives. All right, so for example, if we wanted to talk about my cats Magnus and Selena's habitat, it would be my apartment, an indoor environment. If we wanted to talk about the habitat for a polar bear, it would be in a cold, icy place, like up north in the Arctic. All right, if we wanted to talk about a lion's habitat, it would be a savanna, grasslands, big, wide open grasslands in Africa. All right, things like that. So it's basically habitat's just a fancy way of saying where an animal lives. All right, what's in its environment? What is there where it lives? What makes up the area where it lives? All right, if you need to pause the video now to get these 3 definitions down, please do so. All right, I'm going to move on, assuming that you have taken the time to pause as needed. And please make sure that, for my sub, please make sure that the students do have time to pause and take the notes. Otherwise, they won't be able to keep up. All right. So we're going to skip down. Like I said, we're not going to read this book in depth. All right, I'm not going to read it word for word. I'm just going to use some of the things to explain the pictures. Or, excuse me, I'm going to use some of the pictures to explain the things I'm talking about. So, you have this picture here of all these different birds eating food. Some of them are eating bugs, some of them are eating worms, some of them are eating seeds, some of them are eating things from under the water. Well, you might say, Miss Brown, what does that have to do with anything? Well, the thing is, if we look at these different birds, here's some examples of some different birds. Their beaks are all different. Look, a hummingbird's beak, it's skinny. Not at all like the pelican's beak, which has a big bottom part where they can scoop up fish in water. And it's different from this beak, which is smaller, obviously much different size beak. And this one, which is also different. All their beaks are different. They're all birds. They all have beaks, but they're all different. And they're all different because each beak is just right to get the kind of food that that bird eats. So, for example, the hummingbird eats nectar from flowers, so that long, skinny beak allows it to stick its beak in the flower and get the nectar. Whereas the pelican's beak allows it to get fish. It basically allows it to fish for its food. All right. So, each of these animals have adapted to their food and their environment, to their habitat. Well, what do I mean by that? An adaptation. Come on. I'm going to move on, so hopefully you got those notes already. Adaptation is a change that lets animals survive. Survive means live. All right, that allows them to stay alive. Survive means stay. We'll put stay alive instead. Change to let animals survive or stay alive where they live. Remember, that was that word habitat. So an adaptation. It's a big fancy word and it seems like it might be confusing. But it's not. It's just something about the animal. All right? Something about the animal that lets it stay alive, lets it survive where it lives. So in this case, with the birds, the change is the beaks. All right? So an example. Birds' beaks match where they live and what they eat. All right, that's a pretty long one, so I'll give you a minute to copy that down. If you need to pause the video, please do so. All right. So, moving on. An adaptation is basically something that allows the animal to live where it does. Okay? Here this talks about this next section we're really gonna just kind of skip over. All it basically says is that animals who are best suited to their environment. So it means the animals that have the like we'll use the birds for example. The birds with the beaks that make it the easiest to get their food are the ones who are going to be able to live to adulthood, and they'll be the ones who have babies. And those babies will have the same kind of beaks. So basically all that means is all that this is saying is that the animals that have best adapted to their environment, the animals that have the changes that let them live better, are going to be the ones that live longer and have kids with or have babies with those same adaptations, with those same traits. All right, don't worry too much about that. All right, that's really not what I want to focus on. That's just something to know that the animals that are best able to live, to get the food, to stay safe from predators, those are going to be the ones that get to have babies, and their babies will have the same traits. Like for example, we're going to move on from there. That's not what I wanted. So, all right. So, adaptation allows an animal to survive where they live. Okay, talking about the beaks. So, if an animal cannot adapt, if an animal doesn't have an adaptation, if an animal doesn't fit in their environment, like let's say that there was a hummingbird with a short, fat beak that can't eat their food, that can't get to their food in the flower, what's going to happen to them? They're going to become extinct. which is when an animal dies out and there are no more left. All right, I'm going to scroll this up. If you need to pause the video to write this down, oops. If you need to pause the video to write that down, you can. All right, this is where we came from, the fossils. This ties into the fossils that we talked about. The only way we know about animals that went extinct, like the dinosaurs, is from their fossils. All right. Plants can also adapt, like plants in the desert. I'm just going to quickly mention this. Like plants in the desert don't need as much water as plants where it rains more. Because if you think about it, in the desert, it doesn't rain much. So desert plants are able to survive on less water compared to other plants, for example. So, but we're not really going to worry too much about how plants adapt. I want to focus more on animals. All right, here we go. Animal species have changed in order to find food more easily. Other changes protect the animals from other animals that hunt them. So why adapt? For food? Oh, let's put that better. To get food easier, to protect themselves from predators. Remember, predators are animals that eat others. So why would an animal need to change? Maybe it needs to change to get food easier, or it needs to change because it needs to protect itself better from predators. So, for example, like giraffes. When you look at where giraffes live, there's not a lot of food on the ground that's easy for them to get to. Their food's high up in the trees. So the longer the neck the giraffe has, the easier it is to get food. All right, so that's a physical adaptation. That's a change to the body. All right. Basically, it just means that the giraffes with the longer necks could survive. They had babies with longer necks, so then giraffes started having longer and longer necks. Camels. Camels have a special extra set of eyelids that are see-through that protects their eyes from sand. All right, that's another adaptation. All right, it's something that we don't have because we don't have to worry about that, but camels do because they live in deserts. So they have an extra special eyelid that is see-through that allows them to still see, but also protects their eye from the sand, kind of like goggles. All right, koala bears have toes that allow them, they have these big gaps in their toes that allow them to grab branches so that they can spend their lives in the trees. All right, all these things are just things about their bodies that makes it easier for them to live. That's how they adapted to their environment. There were things about their bodies that let them live easier in their habitat. All right. So, it's not always just talking about their bodies, though. All right, there's not just body changes. So that's one of them. But types of adaptations. So body, and then act, how they act. All right. So, how an animal acts can be based off of an adaptation. All right. It's what allows animals to survive in their environment. So, these are inherited behaviors. Or they can be inherited behaviors, excuse me. Inherited behavior is just something animal is born knowing. All right. Examples, reflex. Think about it. And we have reflexes too. Reflex is something that we do without thinking. I want you guys to picture right now. Let's say someone at home, mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, aunt, uncle, somebody at home is cooking. And they go and they turn on the stove and they put a pot on the stove. And you don't realize they're cooking and you go to touch the pot after it's been on the stove for a while. Now the pot's very hot. What do as soon as you touch that pot? You automatically jerk your hand away, right? You just take your hand and move it away. That is a reflex. You don't even think about it. Your brain doesn't have to think, oh, my hand feels warm like it's getting burnt from the pot. I should move it. No, your body feels the heat, knows it's in danger. Your hand moves away. That is a reflex. All right, something that you do without thinking about it. There's also instinct. All right, it's what allows birds to fly south for the winter. It's what lets sea turtles know that they need to dig a hole in the sand to lay their eggs. All right, it's not something that they're taught. The mama bird doesn't say, okay, little birdies, we're going to fly south for the winter, because that's what birds do. Birds just know. Their instinct is to go south in the winter. So these are ones that they're born knowing. But you can also, animals can also learn behaviors. For example, dogs. All right, you can teach a dog to behave. You can teach a cat not to claw your couch. In theory, at least. Sorry, guys. Selena's in the middle of clawing the couch as we speak, actually. Birds teach their babies songs. All right, so some things animals are born knowing, and some things they have to be taught. Okay? All right, for example, when you were a baby, you were born knowing how to drink milk. You were born knowing how to breathe. You were born knowing how to cry. Nobody did teach you how to cry. But there are other things you have to learn, which is why you're in school right now. All right? So basically, you just need to know that behaviors, the way that animals act that help them live, the way that animals act that help them live can either be something they're born knowing, which is called inherited behavior, or it can be something that is taught to them or that they learn later on. All right. Now, as I keep mentioning, humans have adaptations. We're not, you know, We're part of this too. We're not just off by ourselves and everybody else has adaptations. We do too. All right? With our body, we keep cool when it's hot by sweating. That's why you sweat. This is to cool your body down when it gets hot out. In the winter, you shiver, which your body's trying to make heat to warm yourself up for a little bit. All right, those are both body adaptations. Those are physical adaptations. Those are ways that your body has changed. The human body has changed to respond to its environment, to help us live where we live. All right, and we also learn. Okay, we learn how to make tools. We learn how to hunt. We learned how to survive. We learned how to do everything. I mean, think about we learned how to make tools and better tools. We learned how to make technology. All right, we're constantly adapting. We're constantly making new things to help us survive in our environment. All right, language. All right, that's huge. We adapted our ability to use words, and we teach that to to our children. We teach our children how to speak and how to be able to communicate. All right? So, humans have adapted. Most of what we do is learn behaviors. We have to learn things. All right? And so we have to learn how to live. All right. And that gets us to the end of this book. All right, we are going to stop there for today. Make sure that you have the notes that you have, or that you have all the notes that you need. If you need to go back at any point in the video and rewatch, find somewhere where you need to pause again to copy the notes down. If you didn't get anything, please do that now. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this Miss Brown Presents on Adaptations.